home, told my parents what happened. They didn't believe us. Oh, come on, that can't happen in Kronheim. These are your classmates. The teacher wouldn't allow that. Yeah, but the teacher told them what to do. Oh, come on, you're exaggerating. You're imagining this. Go back to school tomorrow, you'll find everything is okay. Maybe the teacher had a bad day. Go back to school tomorrow. I went back to school next day, the same thing happened again. Only this time my parents watched and saw what happened. Couldn't go back to that school. What we didn't know, what nobody knew, that teacher had been a secret member of the Nazi party from way before Hitler even came to power. And he was just waiting for his chance to kick the Jewish kids out of his school and then force the mayor to enact an ordinance which said, as of today, no Jew in this village will be allowed to buy anything from any store or have any repairs made by anyone. That's the law. But you say, well, why didn't the shopkeepers just refuse to go along with that law? The Nazis had the ability to force you, either economically or, if not economically, physically, to obey what they wanted you to do. They would threaten you, if you don't do this, we will either stop patronizing you or you will be arrested. That's all. So everybody went along with it. Now my mother went shopping in that little town nearby. That was inconvenient, but no real problem. But there was a real problem. My sister and I had to go to school somewhere. There were no Jewish schools anywhere in our area, so they sent us to school in Nuremberg, a town about 3 hours by train. So we couldn't commute. My sister lived in a girls' dormitory then, and I lived with a Jewish family where my parents had to pay. And we attended this big Jewish public school. And would you believe that school had a separate room and a separate teacher for each class? It had a gym. It had a soccer field. I was like a kid in a candy store. I'd never seen anything like that. I loved that school. The fact that my teacher's daughter lived nearby and we walked to school together helped a lot. She was kind of cute too. But living in Nuremberg was a different story. There the Nuremberg laws were in full effect. Jews were not allowed in any restaurant, in any movie house or theater or swimming pool, not even allowed to sit on a park bench. Jews forbidden. A number of Jews saw that as a signal it was time to get out of Germany, and many of them emigrated to either America or Palestine or wherever they could. What made things even worse in Nuremberg was that the Nazis held their annual political rallies in Nuremberg, the Reichsparteitag, the National Party Day. Every year in the fall, thousands and thousands of uniformed Nazis would come into this town of Nuremberg. The SA in their brown uniform, the SS in their black uniform, the young boys and girls in their uniforms with bugles and drums and flags. You know, the Germans love this kind of stuff. Every building had long flags, the swastika flags. The whole town was a sea of flags, and they would march through the town. And then Hitler had built a huge stadium to hold these rallies. I mean, the stadium was bigger than an Olympic stadium. And there they would hold their ceremonies. They would swear by the flags, by touching the flag, and they would march, and they would make all kinds of military kind of ceremonies. And then, at the end of the day, Hitler himself would come in at the top of the stadium, mount the podium, and hold his famous speeches. Hitler was, in my opinion, the greatest orator of the 20th century, or at least one of the greatest orators. It's how he was able to capture his audience. He had a technique by starting very slowly, and slowly but surely working up to a crescendo, to the point where every person in his hearing his voice would cling to every word, and he would make you believe what he said was the gospel truth. And of course he would say the German people are the greatest people in the world. They didn't lose the First World War. They were ambushed. They were betrayed. They are the greatest in Europe. No, they are the greatest in the world. We will rise again. We will be powerful. And on and on. And the people loved it. They ate it up. And they would interrupt him with a "Sieg Heil! Sieg Heil!" And he would stand there like a god. He would absorb it all. It was a demonstration to the German people as a whole, because this was all broadcast on the radio. There was no TV in those times. The whole German people were sitting at their radios listening to this. And many people throughout the world were watching. Because Hitler wanted to tell his German people, have faith, we are going to become great again. And he wanted to tell the rest of the world, hey, you may have lost the First World War, but don't count us out. And at the end of the day, when the whole rally was finished, he would go back to his hotel, and he had the same suite with a little balcony overlooking the main square, and people would have gathered in that square maybe 2 or 3 hours before he arrived, waiting for him to come out on that balcony. It was like a god. And they would yell, "We want to see our Führer, we want to see our Führer." And when he finally came out, they went crazy. "Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil." And he would stand there and take it all in, and would give a couple of Sieg Heils. And who do you think was in the front row of that crazy cheering crowd? This 11-year-old little Jewish boy from Kronheim. I wanted to see Hitler. I wanted to see this great man that everybody adored and everybody felt was the power. Yes, I knew he was anti-Semitic. I knew he was bad. But as an 11-year-old boy, you want to see a big shot, right? If he comes into town, you want to go and see him. I will never forget looking up at Hitler standing on that balcony, and the gaze that he had from those steely eyes, the cold, steely eyes. And I came home, and I proudly told the people I lived with, "Hey, do you know where I was this afternoon? Do you know who I saw?" Oh boy, was I in trouble. Don't you ever do that again. They would have torn you from limb to limb had they known you were Jewish. And that is the fact. They were so worked up that if they had known I was Jewish, they would have ripped me apart. And nobody would have cared. I spent 2 years in Nuremberg, during which time my dad, who was a traveling salesman, could no longer make a living. Even his best customers were afraid to even be seen talking to him, never mind about even buying.